in. Father Loya was not able to make it today, so we have Pat Reedy from his parish, who also belongs to the Tabor Life Institute, right, and gives talks.
Correct, yes.
So he's going to fill in for us today. And for those of us who are joining for the first time, we've already gone through the whole text of Man and Women. He created them last year. So what we're doing now is a little bit of Love and Responsibility, which was the book before this, the Theology of the Body text. And we're kind of doing an apologetics of theology of the body. How do you break this down? How do you explain this to friends and in conversation? And how do we apply this to all the issues of today so that theology of the body can get out there and do its work? Okay, thank you for coming, Pat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sister. It's great to be here. Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm very excited to be here. And for anyone who's online who is from a warm climate, you're not missing anything because it is frigid in Chicago, and it's hard to get places. So, but it's great to be here. And Father's told me a lot about this group. I've heard about it for years and years and years, and I've never made it down myself. So I'm very thrilled to be with you this morning. And just by way of introduction, I'll say a little bit about how I am involved with Father's ministry. My name is Pat Reedy, and I'm a teacher at Northridge Prep School in Niles, Illinois. I teach moral theology and sacraments, and I teach Spanish. And one of the things that I do for the Tabor Life Institute is give the Tabor message, basically, the Theology of the Body message, Tabor style in Spanish. And we continue to try to grow our Spanish ministry. So maybe at the end of the day here, if you have questions about reaching Hispanic audiences with Theology of the Body, we can talk about that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And so the Tabor Life Institute is going strong. We're growing. We have Father, and then there are about 5 or 6 of us lay people who work with him. And I can definitely say, for me, it's a lifestyle. It's not simply an intellectual message, but the Theology of the Body is a way of living your life and sort of reconfiguring the old Catholicism that we all know and love in a way that suits modern people and the modern mind. And that's kind of what I want to talk about this morning, because I'm a teacher. I teach freshmen through seniors in high school. So I've spent most of my time the last 5 or 6 years trying to promulgate the Theology of the Body within the young community, with youth. And so I thought we could talk a little bit today about how you bring this message to youth. So to start off, I just want to give a little bit of an overview. And a lot of this will be things that you already know, but sometimes it's helpful to hear it from another person. Times have changed, as you well know. Things aren't like they used to be. And the Catholicism that we grew up with, our parents learned and our grandparents learned, the way Catholicism was taught is not, we're seeing, I think, the fruits in our culture today. It's not effectively working to evangelize the culture. And I'm finding with the young people at our school, and first I have to say this, our school has some of the best families and the best Catholic young people in the country. I know it. They're the best. They're fantastic kids, and they want to be good. They want to do what's right, and they want to live the church teaching. But it is hard out there. About 3 years ago, I was teaching in a class, and I asked the guy that just said, I said, just be honest with me. Do you guys want to live the church's moral teaching? And they all said, yeah, we do, Mr. Reedy, we do. And this one kid raised his hand. He said, Mr. Reedy, it's not going to be easy. And I just said, all right, they're being honest. They want to live the church's teaching. I think deep down inside they know it's right. But they're also looking at the way the culture is bombarding them with the opposite message of the church, and sometimes they just don't know what to do. Now, I'm pretty convinced that with young people, even if they come from the best Catholic families, they need at least 2 other voices in their life confirming what their parents are saying. If they're really going to take it hook, line, and sinker, they need their parents to be giving them the same message, their pastor to be giving the message, or the church, and their school to be giving the message. Now, right away, and we're not determinists. I'm not being cynical, but I'm saying right away, if kids are in a public school, I'm not saying you shouldn't send your kids to public school. I'm just saying if you're in a public school, they're automatically at a disadvantage because their school's not going to be giving them the message consistent with what their parents and their church are saying. But as we know, even in Catholic schools today, the message isn't necessarily what the church teaches. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I think kids are always have one ear to their parents and they have one ear to the culture. So when they're listening to music, rap music, and they're watching movies and they're watching TV and they're on the computer, that the messages that are coming through are very influential on them. Why am I saying all that? Well, I'm saying that for a reason. There's a little bit of a battle going on in the theology of the body community today over how to present this message. Now, you guys have seen Father Tom's style. Do you like Father Tom's style? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm biased. I think he's the best. And so that's why I work with him. But he's got a particular style, and he's very good, and he's got a charism, I would call it. Not everybody has that gift. But I think Father Tom's got the right idea about how to bring this message to people. And here's the way I'd put it. Mel Gibson did a movie, I don't know how many years ago, called The Patriot. Did anybody see The Patriot? Very good movie. It's worth watching. But there's a scene in The Patriot that keeps sticking out in my mind. What happens in The Patriot, I think it's a Revolutionary War in America, and Mel Gibson is an ex-Army hero, and you know he did something in the Army that he wanted to get away from it. So he's kind of stepped away. And now the British are coming again, and they really need his help. And the British come to his house one day. He's got, I don't know, 6 or 7 kids, and they kidnap his oldest boy, and they take off with them. And it's sort of a cathartic moment because it forces Mel Gibson's character to re-engage in the war, which he was trying to withdraw from. Now, I thought this was very poignant. He takes his youngest 2 boys, maybe they were 11 and 9, and he says, "Go get your muskets." And he takes them with him, and he puts them up on a hill, and he says, "I'm going to leave you 2 guys here." And he basically says, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," that sort of a thing. And it's a beautiful scene. I mean, it's worth watching in the movie, I think, just for that scene and how it's applicable to our culture today, because the youngest boy is shaking with fright. You can see he's scared to death. Now, you don't see this in the movie, but you can kind of read into it. Mel Gibson has been training these kids since they've been young. He's probably had them in the backyard. They've been shooting cans off of a tree, doing target practice. Maybe they've been killing squirrels or birds or something, teaching them how to be good with a gun, an expert marksman. And now a time has come where they have to use that skill in a way I'm guessing he would never have hoped to see. But what ends up happening is the British come, and I don't want to give the movie away, but they rescue the brother back, and then there's more to it. That's towards the beginning. But it's a great scene. And it's one of those scenes that makes your stomach turn a little bit because it's on the edge. You say, boy, I can't imagine being a father and having to put my sons in a position like that. But thank God that Mel Gibson had trained his kids to be able to do that someday if they had to. And unfortunately, they had to. Now, we're blessed in the States because we don't live in a time of war in our country, but if we were growing up in Afghanistan or Iraq, I imagine as parents, we would be under a similar type of pressure. How do you raise a kid in a country where they're seeing violence around them constantly and try to raise them in an ethos of love and peace and charity and confidence and security? I don't know how you'd do it. It would be pretty hard. But I know you probably have to be forming them in a way that's a little bit more proactive in terms of engaging that stuff than we have to in our country. Well, I want to apply that to what's going on sexually in our culture. The kids growing up today are being exposed to things that my grandparents and my parents would have never imagined that they would have been exposed to. My kids ask me questions, and I still get embarrassed at the things they're saying. I would have never thought about that as a high schooler. I don't even want to think about that now. Where are you getting this stuff? You know, and I won't go into specifics, but you can use your imagination. I mean, these kids, and it's not every kid, but I think the barometer or the degree of which kids are being exposed to things that are of a sensual, sexual nature, and even I'd say a perverted nature, are much greater than when we were growing up. So, what do we have to do about that? Well, I think the answer is we kind of have to, as Father likes to say, take the game to them. We have to take this message and bring it to them in a way that says, you know what, there's nothing you can say to me that is going to embarrass me. There's nothing you know about this area of human sexuality that I don't know about, that I haven't thought about, and that I don't know more than you. I know more about this than you do. And mostly, God and the church know more about this than we do. So give me your questions, come to me with your problems, we can talk about this. So I think the key is, whether you're a parent or a teacher or an educator, is to have an atmosphere of openness with the kids. And if there's something in your own life that is that's resisting engaging these things because they may be uncomfortable, you've got to push it a little bit, because we owe it to our kids and the future of our country and church to engage them at this level. All right, so that's kind of an overview, and that's my attitude when I'm teaching. Now, that attitude is not always met with smiles, let me tell you, but I think it's the right one. Okay. Let me give you some, I'm going to talk about some principles that I use with the youth, and then we can have a conversation, dialogue, and I'm open to any questions you have, but just some things that I try to do as I'm forming them. Okay, one of the things I try to do at the beginning is to create this attitude with them. And I want to be very careful drawing a distinction here. I think sometimes adults, and I've seen it with youth ministry at times, adults can have a tendency, in an effort to engage kids on their level, to minimize their own, let's say, adult authority or maturity. Or maybe come down to the level of youth a little bit too much. That's not what I'm talking about here. I think there's a difference between acting like a kid for the sake of gaining a kid's respect and showing a kid that you can walk around in their world a little bit, but that you're doing it so that you can help them rise above it. And that's, I don't know if I do that successfully, but that's one of the things I attempt to do when I'm teaching, and I think that's what a good parent can do. And so I'm not talking about being childish. What I mean is creating an atmosphere where kids know it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff. It's safe. But we're talking about it so that you can learn what's really good and you can master yourselves and then go out and help your friends, so you can live a life of love and joy and live a life that God wants you to live. Okay? So I think kids see that. They know the difference. And when they see that that's your intention, they respond to it. Okay, so the good news for these guys is, and I like to tell them is, you know, you're living in a time where you're hearing and seeing, and some of your friends may be doing things that your parents never dreamed of. And so I like to start a course on the theology of the body with the question, all right, so why does the church say that premarital sex is wrong? I just pose that question. Why? Somebody give me an answer. If you were talking to a friend who didn't agree with the church's position, why would you say, for example, why is premarital sex not okay in the mind of the church? Now, what do you think they answer? First day of class or first day of this chapter, what do you think the typical answers are for a kid that age who hasn't learned this stuff yet?
One of the comments that I hear often is that the church is outdated, and so it's just an initial dismissal of even considering that as a way of life.
Oh, good. I think a lot of kids first off would say, if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really agree with it, or I don't know why. Okay, now I'm teaching at a school where I've never taken a survey, but I'm guessing well over 90% of our kids are not only living this, but they believe the church teaching. They want to live it. They know it's right. What do you think are the answers I'm getting from these kids?
Same.
They'll say they believe in it, but what they'll say is, well, it's a mortal sin. Some of them will even say, well, it's intrinsically evil. These kids have a good formation. And to which I'll often answer, now, do you think that's going to stop a friend at a party from taking his girlfriend upstairs? Right? And they kind of laugh. All right, I guess not. I say, okay, so do you see that the answers you're giving to people in the culture is not going to help them live church teaching? And they're, yeah. So they want to live it. They want to be able to defend their own lifestyle. They also want to be able to explain that to their friends, but they don't have the language. And that's when we say, dun dun dun, dun Super Pope! Pope John Paul II has come onto the scene, and that's the great news for these kids. About 10 years ago, the Pope started this call for the new evangelization. Does anybody remember what the tenets were of the new evangelization? There were 3 of them.
Order, methods.
I never remember the third one either. That's why I was asking the question. It was new ardor, maybe someone online can email it in. It was something like new zeal. It was almost a synonym with ardor. And the third one was new methods. Okay? That's what the Pope said, the new evangelization. If you asked anybody what the new evangelization was, because we keep hearing about this new evangelization. What is it? New methods, new ardor, new zeal. So the Pope gave us some principles, but he didn't give us precise, concrete ways to practice them. All right. That's what our kids are looking for. They're looking for new ardor and new methods. And the great news about John Paul II is anybody who studied him definitely has an ardor. And this is not anything new in terms of the church teaching, but it's definitely a new method. He's got a new language, and he's got a new way to frame the way we see our sexuality and our living out of the image of God. And I'm finding that youth are really responding to this, sometimes just for the fact that it's new. They've never heard it put this way before. So they love it. As a matter of fact, our guys, now I have to be careful because, like I said, some people don't agree with getting into kids with all these details, and my kids get kind of excited about it, and they're teenagers, so are they going to handle it perfectly? No, they're not going to handle it. Are they all going to be really mature about it? No, as much as you tell them, hey, you need to be mature about this, some of them still giggle. I say, all right, everybody time out, take 30 seconds and giggle. Because you say something that they're embarrassed about. But in the end, we're equipping them to live their faith, explain it, and bring it to the culture. So my guys will come up to me and say things like, Mr. Reedy, a TOB question came up the other day, and we really need some help with it. Okay? Now that's great because they've got a framework with which to deal with it. They're not saying a sex question. Not that that's bad, but they're not. Now they're already talking about it in a different way that embraces their faith and makes a connection to it. Or someone will say a comment that's a little bit off color, and I won't hear it, and they'll say, Mr. Reedy, he needs a TOB talk. So, and I love that stuff because you see, that's a sign that what they're hearing from the Pope is resonating with them. Matter of fact, one time I went in, there was something going on in a gym, and I walked into the room, and all of my sophomores started chanting, T-O-B, T-O-B, T-O-B. It's kind of become a chant around the school, and I have to go, okay, not everybody likes to, keep it down a little bit. But I think that's a good sign that this is it's working for them. Okay, I do a couple things when I'm teaching this, and if you find them helpful, that's great. The first thing is to explain to the guys that we need a paradigm shift in the way we think about Catholicism. You heard by the way they answered that question about premarital sex that youth's approach to Catholicism, especially if they're only sophomores, but even when they're 18 years old, they still think about the church as black and white and rules-based. They're still underneath their parents' roof, and so most of their impetus for living correctly comes from the idea of them following rules and being under authority. And that's good, but I think by the time they're sophomores in high school, we want to start to develop that and shift it from rules-based to more of an ethos of living. And the way we can do that is something that Father Tom teaches all the time, which is by showing them that Catholicism is about getting the most out of life. Catholicism is about having the best life. It's about being the most human. And Catholic morality is about being who God has made us to be. And one of the first things I do with the guys, and I teach all boys, so with the girls you could do the same thing, but I take several terms and try to redefine them for them. So the first term we look at is the term happiness. Now, if you're a parent, I think there are a lot of ways you can go about this, because if you understand how the Catholic Church defines these things, and for some of us, even as adults, we may have never heard this. Maybe you've never had a philosophy class. So hopefully this will be helpful. But I think anytime you see a kid using one of these terms in the wrong way, you've got an opportunity to redirect it. Anytime you see television, a commercial, a billboard, anybody in the culture misusing one of these Catholic terms, you can redirect it. And I do this with my kids all the time. So, and they need the repetition. So the first thing we do is we talk about happiness. And we'll do an assignment where they'll have to go home for a weekend, watch TV, listen to radio, and come back with 2 or 3 examples of how our culture defines happiness. So happiness is a new car, or happiness is an Xbox 360, or happiness is playing video games all day. They see it all over the place. Now they know it's wrong, they know it's off, but they can't shift it. So the Catholic definition of happiness is not being in a good mood or having everything that you want to have. It actually comes from a Greek word that Aristotle proposed, which is eudaimonia, which means fulfilling your nature. So to be happy means, in the Catholic sense, means to be fulfilled. And you can't be fulfilled unless you know who you are and then you live accordingly. Now, right there you've got a principle for almost all the moral teachings of the Catholic Church. Because Catholic morality really, in essence, is only trying to do one thing. It's trying to help people live happy lives, to be fulfilled, to be what God created us to be. And so, like I always tell the kids, I say, the job of a church, of the Catholic Church, and the job of every parish is to make happy people. That's what we're here for. We should be making happy people. The saints were the happiest people because they were the most fulfilled. Your parish should be a saint-making machine. That's what we're all about. We should be just cranking out saints. And people should walk into our buildings, and happy doesn't mean you always have a smile on your face, but there should be a sense that the people here are living fulfilled lives. And that's what it means to be happy. So anytime you see a kid getting off track on that, you can kind of bring them, just again, it's like the barometer. You just bring them back. Okay, what does it mean for a Catholic to be happy? I don't know, they never remember, because they need the repetition. What's the Greek word? Because they can make those connections. It's a funny word, so they'll remember it. Even if they don't, you repeat it, eudaimonia, okay, fullness of nature, fulfilling your being. All right, second word that I think needs to be shifted is person. What's a person? John Paul II defines person with what he calls a triptych. 1, 2, 3 ideas that he always uses together. And you've probably heard the old joke. I think by now it's been around long enough that everybody's heard it. But if John Paul II had designer plates, right, it would be
Guardian at best 22?
4. Yeah,
24?
GS24. Maybe it's 22. He uses 22 and 24, but it'd be GS24. Okay, so he uses a triptych from Vatican II, and the triptych is, first of all, that the human person is the only creature made as an end in himself. Okay, now, young people don't know what that means. I bet 50, 60 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, an 8th grader would have known what that meant. But nowadays, young people have no idea what that means. So you have to unpack it for them. All right, so what does that mean? What does it mean? What does an end mean? They don't know what that means. Okay, so it means purpose. The human being is the only creature made that has a purpose in and of himself. And then what you can do is talk about different things that you use. Okay, what are things that you use? And they name a bunch of things. What about, I think it's great to talk about animals. Now some kids, especially I find in public schools, don't realize that animals are not an end in themselves and can be used to a certain degree as a means to our end. So then you've got a whole nother thing you have to get through. As a matter of fact, I was giving a talk a long time ago, probably 10 years ago, and I was trying to teach about this. And one of the young guys, he's probably 16 years old, he was really infuriated. He was actually offended by the teaching. And he said, well, you know, we may not be able to sing like the dolphins, or dolphins may not be able to talk like we can, but we can't sing like the dolphins. Now that to me is pretty, that's a pretty obvious example of how kids are being indoctrinated with the idea that humans and animals are basically the same thing. So when I say we've got a lot of work to do, there's some basic philosophical tenets that kids aren't getting today that we can't take for granted. And those of you who are online, some of your kids may be hearing this, and I would bet even if you're teaching them good, solid catechism at home, somewhere the message is getting through in the culture that it's not okay to think of yourself as a human as being superior to an animal. Okay, so there's just a lot of little things we have to help kids understand today. And you can use examples. You know, I mean, you've never walked into a lion's den and see it painted like the like Annunciation Byzantine Church, right? You'd never see a dog come home and your dog's sitting playing a concerto on the piano. You know, why is that? And those kids still sometimes resist it. Oh, well, yeah, but they do things we can't do. And you have to give them examples to show that we have an intelligence that's higher than the animals. Okay, so you can use any methods you want for that, but the Pope's first tenet is that only human beings are made as ends in themselves. And the conclusion that he draws from that is that, therefore, a human being can never be used. The only proper way to respond to a human being is love. And I'm presuming you've heard all this before. Okay, so, and then you can ask them the classic question, youth haven't heard this yet, although we have, is, what's the opposite of love? And they all say, hatred. And you say, no, and then, okay, and they love the trick questions. So actually, John Paul II says the opposite of love is use. And they get it. Okay, because to use someone is the opposite of loving someone. And then you have to get into a definition of love, which we'll do in a minute. Okay, so that's the first tenet. The second tenet is, man only discovers his true self by giving a sincere gift of himself. And then you have to talk about gift, and we'll do that in a minute. And then the third tenet is, and it's great if you have a crucifix in the room or in the house where you explain this, because you say, Jesus Christ fully reveals man to himself. If you want to know what it means to be human, give a gift of yourself. You know, in the 60s, and sometimes it's good to, kids like stories, adults like stories too, so you remember back in the 60s, I was born in the end of the 60s, so I don't remember this per se, but I at least heard about it, and all the TV shows would see it. You often heard about someone going off, usually to California, on the coast. They'd sit on a rock, they'd get a book of poetry, and they'd just be alone for months or years. What were they doing out there? Finding themselves. Right? You're out in California on a rock. Sorry, Californians, I'm just teasing. I wish I was out in California on the coast on a rock right now, to be honest with you. But they'd be finding themselves. And the Pope isn't diminishing the power of self-reflection, but he's saying that if you really want to find yourself, give yourself away. Be a gift to others. At Christmas time, one of my friends who was in the TOB community was saying to people, he was saying to the youth as they were leaving school, he was saying, all right, don't give a gift, be a gift. And hey, I like that. Don't give a gift, be a gift. And so be a gift, and you discover the meaning for your existence. Who shows us more than anyone else what it means to be a gift? It's Jesus Christ in his gift of self on the cross. So Jesus Christ fully reveals man himself. So that's the first thing, is the triptych, and that defines a human person. We're made as ends in ourselves, which means you can never use someone, ever. It's always wrong. Secondly, how do we know when we're really living our personhood and living in the image of God? When we're giving a gift of ourselves. And the more we give a gift of ourselves, the more we discover that happiness that we're longing for, eudaimonia. And third, if you want to be fully human, you have to know Jesus Christ, because he came to earth to show us what it means to be a gift. All right, so we've got person. Now, I find it's kind of fun to define gift. So what I'll do with the kids is, I always do this little example, and when I'm speaking even to the Spanish people, I'll do this too. Take a little something like this. You can do this at home with your kids if you like. It's a good memory tool, right? It's a mnemonic device because you're using something concrete. And I'll just take this and I'll say, all right, hey, listen, Sister Helena, I've got something for you. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would you like to open it?
Yes, I would. Nothing's going to jump out, right?
Nope. It's a gift.
I love snowmen.
Good. I hope you like what's inside too. It's nothing big, so don't get too excited.
What is it? A lanyard?
A lanyard, yes. Do you wear glasses?
Let's see. It's
No, I
really-
don't.
Well,
Thank God.
for the summertime, you can use them for your sunglasses.
But there's something wrong with it.
What is it?
There's nothing of
They're not. You're right. I'm sorry.
Missing my lanyard.
Well, Now, I gave you that gift, and I'm kind of wondering.
Well, I'm going to fake it. I'll be really polite, like, oh, thank you. That's really nice.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, good. Don't you have a gift for me?
No, I don't.
You don't have a gift for me?
No,
What?
because, well, I'll send you a thank you card, but I didn't know we were going to be exchanging gifts here today.
I don't believe this. I'm really disappointed.
Is this some occasion right now?
All right. Well, you can play that out however you want, but the kids get it, and so then what you can say is something like, all right, now what was wrong with my attitude there? What was the problem?
You should not have been expecting something back. It should have been a free gift.
Why?
Gifts-
Why?
that's the
Okay,
nature of
good,
a
good,
gift.
good,
Is to
good.
freely give it.
Excellent. Okay, so we have someone here who's got a lot of formation, who's studied some philosophy, right, and can put some meat on the bones of these demonstrations. Now, with a teenager can't articulate that, and one of the things we're trying to do is elevate their level of understanding and articulation. We want to give them some terminology that they can use. Things like it's not in the nature of the gift. They get that there's a problem. They can't say why, oftentimes. Okay, so you can say, all right, and you kind of pull it out of them a little bit. You're right. The problem is that to give a gift and expect something in return defeats the purpose of the gift. It's not in the nature of a gift to want something back. And, okay. Human beings are made to be a gift. So what does it mean for me to give a gift of myself to another person? And they get it. It means for me to be generous, to give my life for a person, and I don't expect anything in return. That's a gift. And that, by the way, is the Catholic definition of love. To love means to give a gift of yourself to another person. Or to give for the sake of the good of another without expecting anything in return. Sometimes even at the cost of myself. That's what it means to love. Now, I tend to be a little more heady, and I probably don't use as many of these types of examples as I could. I'm trying to incorporate it more. Youth do better the more you can simplify things and the more concrete you get. One of the experts in this, by the way, if you're looking for some more information, is Katrina Zeno, Z-E-N-O. She was a mom, and she is a mom. She raised a son, and she's got some very good techniques, I think, for helping young people engage this kind of thing. But the bottom line is I think we have to help kids. Father Tom likes to say the culture has hijacked our language, and then it's repackaged it, and now it's sold it back to our kids, and they're all buying it. We have to help them see that the way they're defining person, gift, love is not accurate, and it doesn't really reflect who God's made them to be. When they hear these reconfigurations, they get it. And again, they need a lot of repetition. So happiness, person, gift, and love. All right. One of the things you can do, and oftentimes if I'm teaching a class or giving a talk, is I'll ask them, hey, what does it mean to love? What's love? Where do you see love being talked about? And they'll give examples, and excuse me, then you can kind of redefine it for them. All right? Okay, person, love, and gift. Now, that's part of the paradigm shift that I think we have to make. The other thing that I think we have to do is, and this is where the theology body is expert, is just reframing the way they talk about all of Catholicism. And that's where the Super Pope comes in the best, because he's given us this completely new lexicon for our faith. You remember, maybe, was it 10 or 15 years ago, they came out with New Coke? Does anybody remember that? Do you remember what happened when New Coke came out? I mean, it was a big, it was...
Wanted the old Coke.
Yeah, remember that? It was a big marketing scheme. New Coke, we're changing. First of all, why do you think they wanted to come out with New Coke?
Because Pepsi was beating them?
Right, yeah. I think Pepsi was ahead in the rankings and selling more. I think Coke was still doing okay, but they wanted to sell more. And so marketers have a genius at trying to figure out how to sell the same thing but get people to be more interested in it. And they basically just repackage it. So they said New Coke, and maybe they changed one little ingredient in it, right? So, and it totally bombed. You remember that? Nobody liked it. Everybody, we want the old Coke. And then do you remember what they did as a response?
Classic Coke.
Yes. And Now, there are probably 30 people sitting around at a table about this long, and they're probably talking for days or weeks about this. How are we, oh my gosh, we blew it. New Coke didn't work, what are we going to do? And somebody just said, come on, classic Coke. Everybody likes something classic. They just took the same old Coke and they put a new name on it, new label, and it sold more than the original Coke ever did. And you can see that a lot of companies are realizing this now. So, for example, you notice that there's been a shift in the approach to beer. Real men don't want to drink a light beer, right? Give me a light. You want a light? You know, real men don't want light beer. So what's starting to happen now? Have they changed light beer? No. They've just stopped calling it light. Have you noticed this? And they're giving it real cool names, like Miller Genuine Draft now is MGD 64. Hey. Yeah, only has 64 calories. I mean, somebody sitting in a room like this is a genius. Said, we don't have to change anything. Just put a new label on it and come up with a cool name. Guys like numbers. Call it 64. Al, I love it. You're a genius. You know, you get a raise. And you hear guys that go up in the barn, yeah, give me a 64, and they feel cool, right? They feel tough, and they don't have to admit that they're drinking a light. And I don't think the Pope sat down at a table like this and brainstormed, how can we get the gospel out to people in a way that's going to sell it? You know, it wasn't a superficial move. I think this came from a mystical prayer life of one of the holiest men in history. But this is kind of what he's done. And when we're talking to young people, I think we can, you know, they're growing up in this kind of marketing world. They get it, they understand it, they see it all the time. We can kind of sell it to them like that, and they're okay with it. And we can tell them, hey, sell it to your friends, you know. So the Pope, we can give them this new terminology. The biggest term I think the kids want and that they embrace is the language of the body. They love that. They've never heard it before. Wow, language of the body. And I'm assuming that Father Tom has kind of done some development of that term with you, right? Language of the body. You can tell a lie, you can tell a truth with the language of the body. Couple things you can do maybe with young people to help them understand this. Basic stuff. You can do like charades. Right? Get two people in the front of the room and give one person something to act out, like an emotion. Sometimes I'll just do it myself. Say, all right, I'm going to act out an emotion. You tell me what I'm saying. I'm not going to use any words. You tell me what I'm saying. You know, and I'll do something like, okay, what am I saying? I'm sad. Okay, they get it. You know, you do something like, I'm angry, or happy. Surprise. You can do it. Okay, so they get it. It's a little fun thing you can do. And then you say, all right, how did you know what I was saying? Well, I didn't use any words. No, I could read your body. And then here's the classic distinction that I think all the great speakers on the theology of the body are teaching people, like Father Tom and Christopher West, is that I can say one thing with my words and another thing with my body, and if they're not the opposite, something's going to happen. So if I come up to someone and I say, oh yeah, oh, it's really good to see you. Really good to see you. And why are you guys laughing? Why are you laughing? It's not good. You're lying. Well, how do you know? Because you see it in my body, right? So what does that tell you? What speaks louder, the body or the words? The body speaks louder than words. Okay, so the language our body speaks is very loud. As a matter of fact, it's the language. Let's move that into the realm of sexuality. Okay. I often with the guys do a little bit of, I don't know, it's kind of like a catechesis on physical affection. So I'll say, God's given us different ways with our words to tell someone we love them at different degrees. So for example, you tell me what's more intense and what's deeper. I say, I like you or I love you. What's deeper? I love you, okay? I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. What's deeper? I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to give my life for you. Okay, they get it, right? So God's given us a way with our language of words in which to communicate deeper and deeper levels of intimacy and gift. Now, don't you think he'd do the same thing with the body? So, for example, what's deeper, a hug or a kiss? Kiss, okay? Now, I can kiss someone and it can communicate different things. I can kiss my grandmother goodbye on Thanksgiving. I can kiss my girlfriend goodnight after a second date. I can kiss my wife at the altar after we exchange vows. Okay, I can communicate different things with a kiss. But a kiss communicates something deeper than just a hug or a handshake. Now, I believe there's got to be a way that God has given us to communicate that deepest truth with words, which is, I give my life. I want to spend my life with you, and I give my life for you. And the church would say that you speak that language in your body through sexual union. Sexual union is meant to communicate, I give all of myself to you. I give my life to you. 3 years ago, we took our boys out to Washington, D.C. for the March for Life. Is anybody going this year?
We have a sister who always goes, but she's in Denver studying, so she can't.
So she can't go. She's the only one who can go, huh? You have to man the shop here?
We are strapped.
Mm-hmm.
We have a contingent of our sisters like from Virginia that go,
They go.
and Boston and everything, but not all of us around the country can go.
Have you ever gone?
I have never gone.
You've gone, sister? You haven't gone. Have you guys gone? It's a great event. It's really exciting because you've got, I don't know, maybe 100,000, couple hundred thousand young people. It's almost all young people, 75% young people. And it's great for the kids to be there. We were out there a few years ago. We go every year. And we had split up into groups to do some touring, but then we were going to meet back up on a street corner to go to the parade together. So I was standing with my group, maybe 10 guys, on a street corner, and I noticed, it was hard not to notice, this big group of people, maybe 7 or 8 people coming down the street, and they had a big camera, looked like a television camera, and a big boom mic, and I thought, all right, this is great. Not being afraid of cameras, I said, this is great. Okay, so I said, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. And it was an Irish guy, and I said, oh man, this is even better. Patrick? Patty? I said, you can call me Patty, right? How you doing? He's from Ireland, and it ended up this guy was they were doing a documentary on American life. And they came down to the abortion protest simply because it's part of American life. They weren't pro-lifers. And if you know a little bit of what's happened in the Irish culture in the last 20 years, you can probably presume, unfortunately, that most people are probably fallen away Catholics. So that was my presumption with this guy, and it turned out to be true. Well, he asked us about ourselves, and we explained, Catholic boys' school, Chicago, and, oh, right, can we ask you some questions? And I said, sure. And it was very obvious that he was interested in the young people. He kind of he boxed me out, like in basketball, and I was gone. And he had the boom mic right in with our youth.
Going, remember the
I'm going, come on. I was praying, sister. I was like, all right, don't fail me now. Come on, JP too, So he starts asking him questions, and it's incredible when you see this clash of cultures. And it's another reason I say we have to go for it with these guys. Yes, we may make some mistakes. Okay, is their innocence going to be jeopardized? You know what? If their innocence hasn't already been jeopardized, wait till their first day in college. I mean, we've got to equip these guys and girls for the battle. It is a battle out there. And the other side.
On the TV,
I know.
You are not jeopardizing anything.
Thank you.
Watch 10 minutes of television.
Thank you.
It's all out there.
And the other side isn't pulling any punches. And this was a great example of that. So this guy comes up and he says, why are you guys here? We want to protest abortion. Oh, do you think abortion's always wrong? Yeah, we think abortion's always wrong. I've got my fingers crossed the whole time. Oh, jeez. And he said, you think it's wrong even in the cases of rape and incest? Yeah, we think it's wrong. And then here's the big question. And I say this because I think it's really what's behind all of this stuff. It's the ultimate question. Do you think premarital sex is wrong? And then I actually dropped to my hands and knees. I don't think they could see me, but oh, please, please. And my guys, like in unison, they give a resounding, yes, yes. And the guy said, none of you guys are going to have premarital sex, kind of, almost mockingly. He said, no, no. And you could see it in their eyes. They meant it. And I was like, all right. And then he said, what other weird beliefs do you Catholics have? With his Irish accent, I'm like, you dirty. Let me at him. And one of our guys actually got really flushed. You could see him. And so the guy noticed and he said, oh, have I offended you? And the guy said, no. And then we had a priest there who stepped and said, well, you've offended me. I said, all right. Okay. But I use that story because it shows a lot of things about what we're up against. And it also shows that if we're going to live out our faith, especially in the area of the moral teaching of the church, we need the virtue of fortitude, which is the virtue that gives us courage to do things that are hard or to do what's good, especially when it's difficult. Now, I like to take that story and say to the guys, well, you know what, guys? If you ever get in that situation again, here's what you should do. Go up to the guy's girlfriend, because he had a girlfriend, and say, can I speak with you for a second? And grab her hand and say, you know what? He said, this is the reason I'm living this way, because if you were my bride, I'd like to look into your eyes on the day of our honeymoon and say, you know what, I've had a lot of chances to give my virginity away, but nobody's been good enough until now. And tonight's the night I prove that it's you and only you, and there'll never be anybody else. And I always say, if you find a girl that thinks that's weird, all right, then she needs some theology of the body. But that's the deepest longing of every woman's heart, and it's the deepest longing of every man's heart, to hear those words. Because those are words that are really spoken to us through a person by God, who's totally given himself, in a certain sense, for us and only us. And our hearts will never be fulfilled unless we know that to be true. And sexual morality is not saying a no to anything. It's giving a total yes to the utmost joy that we can experience in human relationships. And they get it. So I think one of our missions should be to empower our kids to reframe, remarket, if you will, this whole idea of virginity. Virginity is your greatest asset. It's not a deficit. It's your greatest gift. Now, you always have to do a little bit of explanation for anybody who's lost their virginity. Or, it's not a total black and white, but I think especially if you're talking to teens and you want them to experience the fullness of the gift of their sexuality, in a time when most kids are so embarrassed about virginity that they would lie about it, say they had when they hadn't. You want to empower them and say virginity is one of your greatest gifts. John Paul II redefines, if you will, again, just takes, it's as if he could see everything from 360 degrees and we've only been looking at one little side of it, and he's taking us around and showing, look at everything else there is to this. We've been fixating on just one little thing. It's a mortal sin. It's intrinsically evil. It's wrong. Don't do it. Or you're going to get hurt. You're going to get wounded. And that's the only thing we can see. And that's true about all these realities. But there's so much more to it. And it's just that we haven't been able to see everything. It's like that's been in shadows. And John Paul II has taken the light of Christ and of the deposit of faith, and he's brought it out and he's shined it on the rest of the reality. So let's talk about virginity for a little bit, and then I want to see if there are any questions, and we can pause for a moment. But John Paul II says there are two aspects to virginity. There's a negative and a positive. What's the negative aspect?
Abstaining, like you're not taking part in something that's a good in itself.
Good. Virginity in its negative aspect is the self-denial. It's the absence of sex. And that is a valid definition for the word virginity. But then he talks about it from its positive degree, and he says, virginity is being totally intact, body and soul. it's having sexual integrity. And so to be a virgin really means you are a person who is fully integrated, body and soul. Therefore, we will all be virgins in heaven. In that sense, when John Paul II talks about being virgins in heaven, he's not saying it's because we're not having sex, which is true. The negative aspect will be present. We won't need it because we'll have the fulfillment of sexuality. But it means we will be fully integrated, totally intact. Our bodies will be replete with the divine presence. It'll be flowing out of us like light coming out of our fingers. We'll be completely fulfilled. There'll be nothing disordered or disintegrated in our human person. That's virginity. So that's why Mary was a perpetual virgin, because she never had sin. She was immaculately conceived. She bore Christ and remained a virgin, which means she remained intact. Then again, it's just shifting from, you hear virginity and lose your virginity, and lose your virginity sounds like bad sin, you did something wrong, versus she was totally intact. It's not that she did something nobody, it's better, it's just that she was totally intact. And we're all called to that. That's why when, at the moment of her passing into heaven, the tradition has it she didn't die. She fell into a sleep and went up body and soul into heaven, because you don't die if you're fully integrated. You only die if sin has disintegrated you. And now she lives in heaven eternally the way we all will. So that's why she is the model for every human being. And you can take this stuff and you can have a little fun with it with youth. Okay, I think it's fun. Okay, so you can say things like, so for example, in marriage, you're not going to lose your virginity. Oh, what? No, you're not going to lose you don't lose your virginity in marriage. If you understand it properly, and you got to be a little bit careful with teens on this, because it's still a very abstract concept, so you got to keep going back to it, I find. But so in this sense, if you're talking about sexual integrity, you're not going to lose your sexual integrity when you're married, are you? No, you're actually going to increase it. You should be more a virgin after you're married than before you're married. What? Okay, but again, it's new language, and so they're into it. They're like, wow, you know what? My church has something to say that's kind of cool, and I always say, go to parties and tell people this stuff. You're going to be the hit of the party.
Or not invited.
Right. You'll be the hit for one time only. One hit wonder. Okay, and think about this. So you can ask the kids this. Did you ever hear, do you know any married couples who waited until they're married to have sex? Yeah. Okay. Did you ever hear one of those married couples say, yeah, on my wedding night I lost my virginity? I don't know. Why not? You hear people say that if they had sex before marriage, they lost their virginity. Why don't people say that when they get married? Because they didn't lose anything. They saved their gift of being intact, and then they shared it with their spouse. And as their marriage grew, that gift of virginity, of integrity, if you're living the spousal meaning of the body, it's going to grow and grow and grow. And that's the gift God is longing for us to have. That's the beauty of your sexuality. Your virginity is one of your greatest gifts. One of the
online says magnificent point.
Oh, great. Well, let's get it out there. And the kids love it. There's one other thing you can kind of attach to this, which is Christopher West does a great thing. He's been doing it since the early days, where he takes the wedding vows and he talks about living out your wedding vows, that we're called to be total, fruitful, faithful, and free, right? That's the 4 things you're asked when you get married, and that's what it means to have sexual integrity. In my sexuality, in my love for another person, I'm total, fruitful, faithful, and free. And to be a virgin means I'm living that. So before you're married, to be total, fruitful, faithful, and free means abstaining. But it means much more than that. It's not just abstaining. It means learning how to see the opposite sex properly. It's how you talk about them. It's your whole way of seeing. It means developing a sacramental worldview. It means SCHL, Father's done that with you, right? SCHL, sacramental, Catholic, human, liturgical. Everything in your life is effused with the sacramental world. That's what it means to be living your sexuality in totality. It's a total attitude about life. It's not just abstaining from sex. And just, kind of like, oh man, I gotta wait till I'm married. I gotta wait till I'm married. There's much more to it than that. After you're married, it means in your sexual relationship, loving your spouse in the way God intended you to love. So that every time you renew the wedding vows in your flesh, you have grown in sexual integrity. You're more total, you're more faithful, you're more fruitful, you're more free. That should be the vision that every Catholic, every human actually has for his or her life. And these are the depths and the riches of the church that we have to share with people that I think, and I understand this because but for the grace of God, there go I think sometimes in our fear of setting people on the wrong track or arousing morbid curiosities or whatever phrase you want to use, we think less is more, and we don't talk about this because, what if a young person, I don't want him to think about this more than he should. And
There's also people have raised the issue of scandal,
creating a scandal, causing a scandal.
which I don't know what planet they live on, but they raise it.
Can you talk to that a little bit, sister?
No,
Well, with that whole thing with Christopher West recently when he was on Nightline, and can people online hear me? That's a very strong mic. They can't? Okay.
I don't know if everybody online knows that Christopher West was recently on Nightline. And, of course, Nightline did what they wanted with the material, but I think they got it 90% correct. They have to make it a little spicy. They called him a sex therapist. And I thought, well, that's a legitimate term. That's not how he bills himself, but that's very legitimate, and then all his critics who have been around for a long time, and they're good Catholic people, they're professors, they some of them do know theology of the body, some of them don't, and admitted that to their own, discrediting, said, well, I haven't read it, but I know the gist of it, I haven't read. Anyway, I'm so glad it came out in the open, because then Cardinal Regali of Philadelphia came out to back up Christopher West and what he's teaching. And who else? His own bishop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, came out. I think he's getting moved, that bishop, anyway. But to a higher place, anyway. Not that there's any higher place. But the objections to Christopher West going on in the media with Theology of the Body was like, this is private stuff. You shouldn't talk about sex in a public arena at all. And not even to present the church's teaching or anything. And it's like, people are entitled to their opinion and their approaches, I think, but at the same time, look around, wake up and smell. We don't really have a choice, in a sense. Even like with your kids, it's really tough. You may want to wait till they're a certain age or something before you present things or whatever, but it's like, you know what? They're going to beat you to it. The world, the culture, the media is going to beat you to it, and we've got to find a new way. And John Paul II has given us this new way.
Also, online comment, discussion doesn't need to be graphic. You get that in sex ed at school. This is the real sex ed because it speaks to human feelings.
The sister's reading a comment online that says the discussion doesn't have to be graphic. They can get that in the public schools through sex ed, but this is the real sex ed. It gives the fullness of the teaching.
And wasn't there a movie a couple of years ago on the Kinsey report? So what is the objection? Isn't that openly speaking about?
Well, Catholics would never want that either.
No, but if
There was a
if that's
movie
one
on
of the
the
criticisms
Kinsey
that
report
should
a few
not-
years ago.
The theology of the body should not be presented on primetime TV, then it's all over.
So the argument is if we're saying that we shouldn't talk about this in public, which some people argue, it's all over. The sex ed culture is becoming more and more explicit.
It's like it's a response. It's in a lot of ways. It's just that it's a response to. We're responding to what's out there. Should we be silent and say no? The way I say it is like, Howard Stern is not afraid to tell his story of sex, and you know, all the adult channels and whatever. Who's going to tell God's story of sex and our story?
Agreed. Yes, I agree. And I think, Sister said, if you didn't hear her, that this is a response. And I think that's a really good way to put it. You can open up the Sun-Times, go to the sports page, and the ads on the sports page are getting closer and closer to pornography, or they're talking about erectile dysfunctions, or they're talking about enhancement drugs for sex, and they've got a picture of a woman in some the negative erotic, not the positive erotic pose, you know, trying to allure the guy looking at the sports page. And I say, if our boys and girls are seeing these things and we are silent about it, what's the message then about that whole arena? We don't have an answer. And then when they want answers to their questions, where are they going to go?
The dumpster.
They are. They're going to go for the fast food gospel, because we haven't presented them the banquet gospel. Some of the, and I agree with the person online who said we don't have to be graphic, and I think we have to be careful with that. And I also think it's okay to do some preemptive strikes. And that's probably where the waters get a little bit more muddy. And if you're not comfortable doing that, fine. But I think it's okay also to try to go into areas out of a little bit of presumption. And I think that's where you get the most arguments. Well, what if in your group, what if some kids have never thought of that before? And again, I guess my answer is that the average age that kids are exposed to porn is 11 years old, 7th grade. It's very hard to believe that, and I know we've got some good kids out there that are staying away from this stuff, but the fact is they're being exposed to things at a younger and younger age. So to tackle these issues in an environment of trustworthiness is the best place for them to go. I think it's important for us as parents and educators, and I think it's important as parents and educators. Parents can't do the job alone, and I'm saying that because I've often been challenged in my position with the argument that the church says parents are the primary educators of their children, particularly in this area. Amen. I couldn't agree more. However, primary does not mean exclusive, and I want to say to any parents who have that attitude that I agree with you. We want to support the parents' teaching, but I think we have to recognize that parents can't do it alone. And if the pastor and the teachers are not echoing the sentiments of the parents, and in some cases filling it out a little bit, because parents don't, not every parent's been educated the same way as a teacher or a priest has, or a nun, okay, then the message isn't going to have the potency to help the kid get through this culture, and not just white-knuckling his way through and say, I'm not going to have sex while I'm around, but really to be comfortable in his own skin and living his morality with happiness, real happiness, fulfillment.
We've got a comment about within the home, body language as the best teacher for the children to see the physical relationship between parents, not the private stuff, but chaste embraces, kissing, hand-holding, those are their first lessons.
Yes, that's excellent, excellent. Parents in the home modeling holy, chaste, natural, good love in front of their children. Their embraces, kisses, the types of affection that you'd show. I think that's wonderful. Now, here are some other things you can do that are a little bit more radical, but I think this kind of stuff is great, okay? And this isn't for everybody maybe, but it just gives you an idea of some of the ways you can be creative with this. I met a couple a few years ago at a wedding. It was a TOB wedding. It was a couple that actually, it was it was great. It was great. It was the first TOB couple that I knew outside of Christopher.
The book, right?
Right, they had the Bible. She had the Bible, he had the TOB, and it was beautiful. And one of the guests was in a conversation with me, and he had 6 or 7 kids, and he said, in their house, they tried to create an architecture that would communicate. This is sacramentally, in kind of the invisible being revealed through the visible, this idea of the spousal mystery, and that Christ's love on the cross is spousal, and he consummated his love for humanity on the cross, and that he continues to do that through the Eucharist, and that a husband and wife are imaging that in their love for each other, and particularly in their love making. So they had a ranch-style home, he said, and they had a chapel in their home so that they could have, I don't think they had the Blessed Sacrament there, but they had a chapel. And he said there were only two places in the home where the floor was elevated: the altar and the bed. He wanted the kids to kind of see implicitly that there's an equivalence, there's a parallel going on between what happens on that altar and what happens in that bedroom. And I thought that's a beautiful way to do it. I find the kids really love the idea of Jesus Christ, the hero, the groom hero. And we're trying to create in Tabor this sort of an ethos of, it's like a spousal ethos, that we begin as Catholics to see everything spousally. So Christ is his bridegroom hero. The human race got captured by Satan, and it's just like a movie. And every movie, you ever notice every movie's exactly the same, the movies we like? I mean, they all have the same plot. Okay, the guy and the girl, neither one's married. They meet, they fall in love. Boom, she gets whisked away somehow, and there's some enemy trying to attack the guy, right? It's usually some conspiracy scheme. There's one guy at the head of it. He gets the girl. They go off to some foreign place. She's in a room. It's like the old image of the girl in the castle, right, tied up. The guy has to go. I mean, he's got to fly in planes, and he's got to take bullets, and he's got to go through all this stuff just to get there. Then he comes crashing through the ceiling, and he gets in this fight with the guy, and then it's always the same. First he's winning, then he's losing, right? Then he's losing, and you think he's dead. Then he comes back, right? I mean, it's always the same drama. We fall for it every time. Then he kills the guy falls out of the wind, goes, dramatic, and then they embrace, and it's the love. Every movie's just rehashing that same plot every time, and we love it. And we go back year after year after year. Why? Because that's stamped into our being. That's our drama. It's the human mystery. Jesus Christ has bursted into humanity like a hero coming through a ceiling, and he's stamped out Satan by his death on the cross, and then he's grabbed his bride, and you ever jump into a pool and you go, and there's that moment at the bottom where you kind of pause and then you push off? Right? Christ has come in, he's crushed the head of Satan, and in the Eastern Church we have an icon where the icon of the harrowing of hell, it's called, where Christ is bursting the gates of hell and Satan's under them, and he's got Adam by one hand and Eve by the other, and I call that's the moment at the bottom of the pool, the pause, and he's about to go and shoot up. And if we are in him, holding on to him, living a sacramental life, that's where we go. And it's the mystery of the groom and the bride. And we love it. We can't get enough of it. And we can teach kids how to see their lives that way, and how to watch movies that way, and hear songs that way, and explain all of church teaching that way, because it's possible to explain all of church teaching out of the marital framework. And it's fun, too. Are there any questions? Does anybody online have a question?
Yes, are you also Eastern Rite?
I am a classic Roman Catholic who's been going to an Eastern Rite church and has never switched rites. I've been going to an Eastern Rite church for about 5 years exclusively now. So I'm trying to breathe with both lungs.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love the Eastern liturgy, and Father Tom's church is sort of the crown gem of Eastern churches, so it's a pretty special place.
I think the thing about going back to not wanting to.
Do you want the mic, sister?
Going back to the thing about, maybe we're going to introduce a term or a thought that young people haven't heard of yet, is okay because of the way we're presenting it. It's like, which I do when I teach philosophy also to teens. It's like, okay, so they may not have heard of some of these really enticing, catchy slogans that are wrong, but it's like, my whole thing is you heard it first in the Catholic Church. Everything. You should have heard everything first in the Catholic Church in the right context, with the right perspective, the right teaching. And if you're going to go off, well, that's, your choice. But to say that you would never ever have heard it in your entire life and we're the only ones that ever presented it to you, I don't think that's really accurate. And it's so much better to hear it in the right context, with the right meaning, than to hear it later with a completely different the wrong context to bolster its wrongness.
That's a great point.
You know. So anyway.
I think that is an exceptional point, sister.
But I think we have to not be, we don't want to bludgeon people with, like, we're right and this is right and so our approach is right and you just got to deal with it. I think we have to be gentle and caring and patient and bring people along slowly and answer all the parents' concerns one by one, reassure them. Because I think our attitude, I think we need to be patient in our approach to bringing people along. And we're so desperate to get the message out there, and we know how desperately people need it. But at the same time, like Christopher West does, he's a gentleman. He answers all his accusers very calmly and respectfully, and he'll, as long as it takes, to go over those questions, because that shows that our heart is in the right place too, that we do respect the human person totally. And so, but at the same time, we have to move forward on this. We can't shut up. We can't. That's just what, like, the bad parts of the culture and the world would want us to do is shut up, get intimidated, back up, shut your mouth, so the message doesn't get out there.
One of the phrases that has been around since I've been a kid is hot, right? She's hot. Man, she's hot. And I've been teaching for years, and I used to say, hey, don't talk about a woman like that. That was my approach, and it's still kind of my approach. I have 4 younger sisters, by the way, and no brothers, so I think that's one of the reasons this theology of the body has been so significant for me. It's I don't know why God doesn't give every man younger sisters. That's one of my questions I'm going to have. If I make it to heaven, come on, Lord, what were you thinking? I mean, you could have solved so many problems, There's something about probably fatherhood, which I haven't experienced yet, that's even more so. But being an older brother, there's sort of protective nature that you have. And the guys understand that. I said, would you want to hear one of your friends calling your sister hot? No, okay. But with the theology of the body, see, again, Super Pope comes in and gives us a new language. And so what we'll do sometimes is a little catechesis around that. Christopher is sort of a master at this. And I just do it once. I dabble in it a little bit. But, the Pope uses this term supra-sensual. Talks about the supra-sensual reality of human nature. And so we'll introduce that term and say, the Pope talks about supra-sensual. What does that mean? All right, it's beautiful because on one hand, it affirms that the human body is sensual and that it's good to see and to notice. In Love and the Responsibility, John Paul II, over and over again, he emphasizes that the human body has a sexual value. And he says, that's good. And it's even okay to have a bodily reaction in front of the sexual value of another. That's not using a person. What you do then is the key. But and he even says a woman can dress in such a way to accentuate her sexual value, as long as it's done in such a way that that sexual value is absorbed within the greater meaning of the human person. Okay, so we talk about the fact that for the boys, seeing a woman and being attracted to her sensuality is good, and you don't want to repress that. But suprasensuality means there's something in her, and even in her sensuality, that points to the beyond. And what you're really attracted to is something that she could never give you. Because you'll never, even if you marry the most beautiful woman on earth after the Virgin Mary, you'll never be totally fulfilled by that person, because what you want is God. She can help you experience God in a different way. But unless you realize that that's what she's ultimately pointing to, you're going to fall short, and then you're going to be frustrated. So when you see a woman and you're attracted to her beauty, you want to say yes, and then you also say, oh Lord, let me also experience what's beyond, because that's what I want both. It's okay to want both. So you say, she's not hot. So I say, if you hear a friend at a party saying she's hot, you say, she's not hot, she's suprasensual. Huh? And they've got a whole catechesis.
We've got a question. Well, what if we're like Moses and can't speak too well?
Well, you know what? That's a great question. What if we're like Moses and we can't speak too well? I find that there are a lot of people who are living this already, even if they can't articulate it. And so we don't have to be the best speakers on it. I think we have to know what our gifts are and what our limits are. And the key is knowing what is a person really looking for and how much of that can I meet, and then you give your gift. And if they're looking for more, we've got all these resources that we can point people to, and so that they can get their other questions answered. It's a great question.
Question. Referred to this a little bit earlier. How do you talk to young people, those who have already lost their virginity? You know, someone, just a wonderful young lady, and went off to college and met her first boyfriend and got involved, and probably would have stayed with him forever. And he ended the relationship, and now she's adjusting, and I'm sure it's hard. How do you? I don't think she's even aware of theology. A little bit, but how do you handle that whole idea of lost virginity to someone who's been wounded in that?
Yes, very good question. The question is, how do you handle a person who's lost his or her virginity with this message? And I think, first of all, you do what Sister said, is you always reach out to the human person, and you always try to tend to that wound. So we don't shove this down people's throats. We recognize there's a lot of pain, a lot of woundedness out there. And when you talk about this, sometimes it brings up the woundedness, because people they get it and they see the ideal, and if they think they haven't lived up to the ideal, they can get discouraged. So I think we want to encourage people that the point of the theology of the body for John Paul II was to lead people into intimacy with Jesus Christ and the church. And that's where our fulfillment is. No one's living this perfectly. And no matter who we are, whether we've lost our virginity when we were a teenager, or whether we're in a marriage and we're not living our sexuality properly, we're not loving our spouse properly, each one of us can find some area in our life where we need deeper conversion in this. And there's somewhere in each of us that's unevangelized, an unevangelized zone. And often we act out sexually because of that. So the answer is not to be discouraged and ashamed. The answer is to look inside yourself and say, where have I not yet found the intimacy with God that I'm really longing for?
Online, there was a term used among Catholics here in Cincinnati for a couple of years, secondary virginity, starting anew fresh. Is that still a usable term?
Okay. I've talked with Katrina Zeno about this a lot. If you know her, she's probably one of the most popular female speakers on the subject, and I agree with her position on this, which I don't like the term secondary virginity, because I think it discredits what John Paul II is trying to do with the idea of virginity. Secondary virginity, what it does is it kind of cuts you off in a certain sense from your past. Okay, I lost my virginity, and now I've got to regain something, but it's always lost. And on the negative side, there's something true about that. But I prefer to emphasize the positive aspect of virginity. So how would that look to someone who's already had sex outside of marriage? Well, that would look like this, okay? If virginity means sexual integrity, in a sense, you can lose that virginity. You can compromise your sexual integrity without having intercourse. And that's really key for teens, okay? Because one of their questions, they always ask, how far is too far? And I am getting to the question, but I'm kind of going around a little bit. Okay, how far is too far? Is grinding okay? I mean, I must have answered that question 300 times in the last 2. Is grinding okay? How many times do we have to answer? I mean, they just, and can you French kiss? What about oral sex? Because they're being told that oral sex is okay. So if you have an understanding of virginity as sexual integrity, being total, fruitful, faithful, and free, then there are a lot of things you can do sexually that compromise that integrity, and in a sense, you've lost or you've at least compromised your virginity. You do the most damage to those 4 principles if you have full intercourse sex. But it certainly doesn't begin there. Now, on any of those levels, it is never too late to increase your virginity, to re-engage your sexual integrity. So if you have had sex, the goal is, I forget how Katrina, the word Katrina uses, but it's more of a replenishing your virginity or restoring your virginity rather than having secondary virginity, which really just means I'm not going to have sex until I'm married. So it emphasizes more the abstinence, whereas this emphasizes more the fact that you're reintegrating yourself. Does that make sense?
They love it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like you can be whole again.
You can be whole again.
Yeah.
We've only got 5 minutes. If there are questions, I take them, and if there aren't, I want to share with something that I've found to just be dynamite. That I actually have talked to Katrina's. You know, she gave it to me actually, and I've asked her for permission to kind of share it. So, unless somebody has a burning question.
What is a TOB wedding?
That's a great question. Well,
They have wedding planners for that now.
they should.
It'll be wedding.
It's a marriage between 2 people who, throughout their dating life and their courtship, are really trying to live the ethos of the theology of the body. And they're getting married with an understanding of this. And that's sort of the backdrop of their married life. Okay. Katrina talks about this, and I've shared it with the youth, and it's a really, again, it's not maybe new, but it makes some connections that perhaps we haven't made before. She goes through the scriptures and said, you know, whenever God makes a long-term covenant, it always involves blood, some kind of a blood. The tearing of a veil and blood. When I do with the guys, I call it covenant, veil, and blood. So Abraham entered a covenant with God. It was permanent. And there was a shedding of a veil, which was his foreskin, and there was a shedding of blood. To be in covenant with God now since the fall means there's going to be bloodshed. That's the price of the fall. Okay? Later on in the scriptures, you have in the Holy of Holies, the priest entering the tabernacle, the veil. Only once a year he could part the veil. He'd kill a goat or an animal as the offering, and then he'd take the blood and he'd sprinkle it on the veil and he'd sprinkle it on the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, and that would be the sign of the Israelites' long-term covenant with God. Jesus Christ is consummating the wedding of God with the human race at the cross. And his side is split, blood pours out, and what happens at that instant? The church is born. Excellent. The veil of the temple, the Holy of Holies, the Jewish temple, the veil is split in 2. Covenant, blood, and the veil. The veil always indicates that because God's always partly hidden and partly revealed, the veil is that part that's hidden. And we don't have freedom to just go behind that veil whenever we want. God invites us behind that veil when we're in covenant with Him. And so all of those moments in history show that to be in covenant with God and to share in covenantal permanent love, only you forever love, there's blood and there's a veil. Now, if a man and a woman are living the spousal meaning of their body prior to marriage, when they get to their married life, and it's hard for me not to get emotional when I talk about this because it's so beautiful, because this is stamped right into our bodies. God loves us so much. They enter into a covenant at the altar, and then when they seal their bond in the consummation, there's actually the splitting of a veil and the shedding of blood. So that it's not just their love they're consummating, but they're together entering into a lifelong covenant with God. And that's exactly what they're imaging.
Someone here commented, talk about saving the best for last.
And I give Katrina Gazzino credit for that, but it's so beautiful and moving. And when you talk, can you imagine if every young person in America who was a Catholic, and you'd have to understand Catholicism, or that's not going to make as much sense. But could you imagine a kid understanding the sacramental reality of sexual union that way? Boy. I mean, it's not going to solve every problem. It doesn't mean kids aren't going to be tempted. But if we can at least give our young people some of these tools and some of this language, they're going to be so better equipped to go through this world and not take as many hits. And I think that's what we need to be about as the Theology of the Body community, because our youth are the future. We need them, and we owe it to them. And we owe them more than passing out condoms and saying, you're going to do it anyway. Their dignity is so much more than that. So that's my encouragement to all of us, that we do what we can to learn this, and then whether you're a good speaker or not, we pass on what we can, and we trust God to fill in the gaps.
And I think if we know some good books, like that's so challenging, but like, or YouTubes to send people to as a little teaser, like to
Thank
get
you.
them interested.
Thank you. I did write that down. I didn't want to forget that, but I would have forgotten it. You're not reminding me. Thank you. Okay, a couple of books I would recommend is, for youth, I think one of the best books out there is a book called God's Plan for You by David Hayduke, and it's published by Pauline Press. It is. And if I had a copy, I'd hold it up. But Hayduke is spelled Hajduk. My teens loved that. They ate it up. They said, boy, this guy really knows how to speak to youth. I think it's one of the best books out there. Yeah, it's 2 thumbs up. Okay. Another one I think is very underestimated is Real Love by Mary Beth Bonacci. She takes questions she's gotten from high schoolers and young adults for, 10, 15 years speaking, and she answers, bless you, and she answers all the tough questions. That's a great one. Jason Everett, E-V-E-R-T, any of his books, and his wife, Rosalina Everett, I think her name is? Kristalina, thank you. Sorry about that. And they're both excellent. And they've each published a couple little tiny pamphlets, maybe 30, 40 pages, but it's small. You can read it in one sitting. One's called Pure Love, one's called Pure Manhood, and one's called Pure Womanhood, I believe. And I think they're phenomenal. Again, because they approach the tough questions that teens have, but with the theology of the body ethos. Christopher West, Theology of the Body for Beginners, is, I think it's one of the best books you can give anybody as an intro to the topic. It's a little bit tough for teens, but if they've had some training and they've done a reading on some of these other resources, that might be the next level to introduce them to.
Jason Everett has that new one, Theology of His Body, Her Body.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. Oh, God, that sounds great.
My God. It's 2 books in one. You flip it over, one side for the girls, one side for the guys. It's awesome.
All right.
Fabulous.
Ah, excellent.
We have done, I'll show you.
Oh, great. Okay. Jason Everett, new book, Theology of His Body, Her Body. Mm-hmm. 2 books in one. That sounds good. And then kids like action. So Jason Everett's one of the best. You can go on YouTube, and he's got short little snippets. Play that for your kids. Let them see some Everett. And if they like them, you can get full-length DVDs. Hey, he really is one of the best out there. Am I missing anything? There are some other things for teens. There's the Theology of the Body for Teens, published by Ascension Press, and that's very good. And that's more of a classroom type of a manual, but I know some parents who are using that at home and kind of almost as a homeschooling device and taking their kids through it, and I think that's excellent. Am I missing it? There's one called Theology of the Body Made Simple. That's okay. I think God's plan for you is much better. And what else am I missing? Oh, and then there's a series of books. And oh boy, it's been so long since I read them. I'm drawing a blank now. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Purity of Heart is one of them, and I apologize that I can't think of his name. It's another excellent series. It's maybe for a little bit older, maybe a young adult, but I think if you start with those for teens, it's good. And then I have to recommend anything by Tabor Life. for teens. Any of Father Tom's DVDs, his TOB for Teens DVD is excellent. And basically, I think if, you know what, let's face it, are we really interested in anything else? I mean, I think it's okay to tell kids, yeah, it's okay to be interested in this. And his sister said, hey, you want to hear it from us first. We've got the answers. And we always tell our teens, hey, listen, I always say, when you're in college, your phone should be ringing off the hook. People should be knocking on your door day and night if they know you're Catholic, because they should know that you've got all the answers to this stuff. And that's the attitude you want to have.
Father Samuel Medley, he's same group as Father Karapi, SOLT.
SOLT, yeah.
Down in Texas, and he said he's a campus minister for high schools and colleges, and he goes, this is all they want to talk about is sex. It's like that's all, when he does spiritual direction, when he comes to talking, that's all they want.
And you'll be starting a 10-week program on love and responsibility on Ustream.tv.
Do you want me to say that for the...
You can. I'm typing it up right now.
This is Father Medley?
No, Father Samuel Medley, yeah.
Father Samuel Medley, 10-week series on love and responsibility.
Starts January 22.
January 22nd.
Thursdays.
Friday nights.
Friday nights for 10 weeks on Ustream.
Ustream.tv.
Ustream.tv. That sounds like it'd be fantastic. I'm going to make a note of that myself. Well, this has been a delight. Thank you so much.
It's good to know that
Thank
the
you.
Spanish is going ahead too. You know, that's wonderful.
Yes, and if anybody, please, if you're out there and you have friends who speak Spanish or you want to do something in Spanish, or that's really been my baby.
Are you available to go get talks?
Yes, and we just completed a 9-hour training. So I'm trying to do something like Christopher, like a 9-hour training TOB.
Do you have? Are you on DVD? Do you have?
I have one right now.
Okay.
Others pending, but
Spanish?
one. Yes. So I can get that to you, and that's
In Tabor Life.
Tabor Life, and you can go on theologyofthebody.net for any of our material and a lot of Christopher's material. It's actually the best source probably for TOB material, theologyofthebody.net. And my last comment will be, I think it's pretty obvious that in 100 years, most of the people with our skin tone are going to be gone, and it's going to be a lot of Hispanics and probably a lot of Muslims in this country. And we have to, it's an imperative, and I believe it's a call from Our Lady of Guadalupe, who's the patroness of the Americas. We have to get this to the Hispanics. And there's virtually no one doing this.
Right.
Starting, there's a little seed that's growing right now, but
And you
they need
know,
it.
they're actually better ground than we are because they're already so Catholic.
Yes.
And you know, they understand Our Lady and how that all works. And
Yes.
I have seen like people Hispanics go to like one Theology of the Body talk and like turn their whole lives around. It's like amazing. So it's gonna really take off.
Yes. So let's build a team and get out there.
Yeah,
They need it.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for everyone who
so much.
participated online, and thank you folks here, and hope to see you again sometime.
Yes, thanks, Pat.
Thank you very,
Thank
very,
you.
very much. Everybody here is very enthusiastic.
If you're interested in going to, there's a free Lovely Zone next week. It should be good.
Okay, I'm going to turn this off.
Oh, thank